All right, for more on today's march in Washington and the significance of its timing, we're joined now by Tracey Webb, management consultant at Tracey Webb Associates. Tracey, good to have you back on today. We appreciate it. Obviously,
Alex,
as you step back and look at this, as you step back and look big picture, so much has changed in the 57
mhm.
years since Dr. King gave that speech during the March on Washington. How much closer do you think we are now as a country to realizing Dr. King's dream?
Alex, it's good to be with you again, and thank you. We are actually, I take the opposite view. I don't think that a lot has changed, even though we had our first Black president. All of the indicators, in terms of the social structure, the political structure, the economic structure in this country are reverting backwards. It is a very frightening time.
Do you think, obviously, we are seeing protests in the streets. We are
Mhm.
seeing the Black Lives Matter movement here pushing for change, calling for racial justice in this
Mhm.
country, and calling for police reforms. Do you
Mhm.
think that this movement is translating into real, lasting structural change?
I absolutely do if we accelerate that change. And that change, any type of social or organizational change, only happens when individuals take steps and then the collective moves together. I do see through the work that I do in with corporations and organizations monumental awareness beginning to happen and a desire for education about how we do better.
Still, though, I mean, when it comes down to it, in terms of legislation, we
Hmm.
obviously, after
Hmm.
the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, we had the Justice in Policing Act that was introduced, and
Hmm.
that still has not passed. Here in
Hmm.
California, a number of police reform bills were introduced after George Floyd's death. They are still stalled in the legislature.
Hmm.
So it sort of, it begs the question if if there, tends to be that sense of complacency. There is outrage after one of these cases is brought to the
Hmm.
forefront, and then maybe complacency sets in.
I don't think it's complacency. I think it's utter frustration. It's absolute frustration. The the sentiment among those that I've spoken to recently and worked with is almost a desperate sense of what do we, the question of what do we do and how do we do it. I led a session or facilitated a session at one of America's largest corporations yesterday with senior managers. People cried on the call. These were very accomplished corporate executives and managers crying of all races and hues out of severe and utter frustration with where we are. I'm not trying to paint a picture of, well, we can change this, but first we have to acknowledge the deep cut and the deep wounds that are festering in this country right now.
Obviously, one of the main calls to action today during
Mm-hmm.
the event in Washington D.C. was for people to get out and to vote this November.
Mm-hmm.
Do
Mm-hmm.
you believe that the movement for racial justice that we're seeing in this country right now is going to translate into a larger turnout come November?
Absolutely. And what's I think unique about this point at this inflection point in our country is that we realize, I think so many people realize that we have to save our country. We have to make sure that it continues to survive based upon the principles upon which it was built, but not on the backs of the people upon which it was built. So what this means is we have to go to the voting booth, however we do it, be it from your desk, from your kitchen table, and drop the ballot off or mail it. But we're also being very careful to make sure that systemic racism and systemic inequalities don't undermine the effectiveness of the vote by making sure that we keep the
Mm-hmm.
post office functioning, by making sure that people are safe if they do go to the polls, and by making sure that the good old fashioned poll watchers are out there so this can't be undermined.
All right, we'll leave the conversation right there. Always appreciate your time and your insight as well.
Thank you.
Tracey Webb, management consultant at Tracey Webb Associates. So good to have you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Take care.